inform ako pag nag-choppy tayo. Or there is a technical error. Okay. Meron na ba yung PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So make sure na nakapin yung PowerPoint natin kasi yung iba, yung Philippine nila is yung mukha ng mga classmate nila. Okay. We have here categorical syllogisms. Okay, so to give you an idea with this one, let's start with propositions first. So last meeting we have discussed propositions, and if we have here group of propositions, we call this group of propositions as argument. And well, of course, these propositions are related or connected to each other before we can call them as argument. Okay? So pag hindi related yung dalawang propositions or two or more propositions na ginamit, or that group of propositions are not connected to each other, then it's not called argument. Okay? And we can categorize argument as a syllogism. So ano ba ang syllogism? A syllogism is an argument that contains three propositions. So it should contain three propositions only. And wherein we can categorize as well yung propositions na ginamit sa syllogism. Meron tayong tinatawag na premise and conclusion, or the two. So ano ba yung premise natin? That is the first and second proposition. Tapos yung conclusion, yung pangatlong proposition. Okay, so ano yung role ng ating premises? Yung role ng premises, this is the two propositions that will support our conclusion. And yung conclusion naman, that is the proposition that is derived from the two given propositions. So these three propositions are connected to each other. Okay, again, pag syllogism, it contains three propositions. So it is an argument that contains three propositions. Yung first and second na proposition tinatawag natin premises. And yung second ay yung pangatlo naman is tinatawag natin conclusion. Okay? And we can categorize syllogism into two. We have what we call the categorical syllogism and hypothetical syllogism. So let's just differentiate this two types of syllogism. Okay, so categorical syllogism is defined as, okay, pakibasa nga, Mr. Felix.
Categorize something into specific classes or groups, sir.
Okay, thank you. So for a categorical syllogism, you can find their classes or groups of things. It's not only things, but a group of animals or group of people. But in syllogism or in logic, we call them as classes. So usually we call them as classes, not groups. Okay, so let's have here a concrete example of a categorical syllogism. Okay, pakibasa nga yung example natin, Miss Isabel.
All root crops are vegetables. All sweet potatoes are root crops. Therefore, all sweet potatoes are vegetables.
Okay, thank you. So from this syllogism, you can identify classes or groups. So what are those classes or groups? We have here the class of root crops, and then the class of vegetables, and then the class of sweet potatoes. So there are three classes that are used in this example of syllogism. Kaya tinatawag natin siyang categorical because there are categories or sorting of things. Okay, so that is for categorical syllogism. So for us, for a hypothetical syllogism, from the word hypothetical, there is the presence of what we call this one, hypothesis and conclusion. Doon naman sa categorical syllogism, from the word categorical, we can have here the word categorizing or sorting of things. Okay. So hypothetical syllogism is a syllogism that contains at least one hypothetical, or also known as the if-then statement. So let's have here an example. Pakibasa nga, Mr. Kenneth.
If I do not wake up, then I cannot go to work. If I cannot go to work, then I will not get paid. Therefore, if I do not wake up, then I will not get paid.
Okay, thank you. So that is an example of a categorical or a hypothetical syllogism. Okay, so if you're going to observe here in our example of syllogism, there is the presence of a hypothetical statement, or also known as the if-then statement. So all of the three propositions used are if-then statement. But it's still considered, if there is only one if-then statement, it's still considered as hypothetical syllogism, because a hypothetical syllogism contains at least one. So it's not necessary na lahat ng propositions na ginamit or present is hypothetical or if-then statement. So that is for hypothetical syllogism. So we're just going to focus our discussion on categorical syllogism. So categorical syllogism is a very broad topic already. So we need to specify our discussion, or we need to focus on one topic. Okay. So let's try to analyze our example on categorical syllogism. So we have here all root crops are vegetables. All sweet potatoes are root crops, therefore all sweet potatoes are vegetables. Okay. So sabi natin kanina, a syllogism has, or the propositions used in a syllogism could be categorized into two. We have what we call the premises and conclusion. And we can also categorize the premises into two. We have what we call the minor premise or major premise. So the first stated proposition is called as the major premise, and the second one is called as the minor premise, and then always remember that the third one is called as the conclusion. So by the way, this is the standard form of categorical syllogism. So there are other forms of categorical syllogism. It could be a continuous sentence, or it could be in paragraph form. So we're going to focus on the standard form. So it follows this form when you see standard form of categorical syllogism. So again, we have here the first statement is called as the major premise. So always remember that. And the second one is called the minor premise, and then the third one is conclusion. So the role of these two premises is to support our conclusion. And well, of course, our conclusion should be derived in the two first given premises. Okay. And always remember, pag categorical syllogism yan, dapat may classes yan. So ano ulit yung classes natin dito? We have the class of root crops, the class of vegetables, and we also have here the class of sweet potatoes. Okay. So for categorical syllogisms, we can identify here three terms. Okay. So meron tayong three terms sa isang categorical syllogism. And those terms are, we have what we call the major term, minor term, and then the middle term. Okay. So let's remember, our symbol for major term is capital letter P, and our symbol for minor term is capital letter S, and for the middle term is capital letter M. So those are the symbols of the following terms. Okay, so what is our major term? So from the word major, it should be found in the major premise. Okay, so we have here two terms in our major premise. We have here root crops and vegetables. So which of these is our major premise? So let's have here the definition of major term. Okay, so when we say major term, this is the predicate of conclusion, and it's found in the major premise. Okay, so I do na alam niyo kung paano identify ang predicate and subject sa isang sentence or proposition. So we have here our conclusion, all sweet potatoes are vegetables. Ano ang predicate natin dito? Is it sweet potatoes or vegetables? Anyone, ano ang predicate natin dito sa conclusion natin na all sweet potatoes are vegetables? Diba meron tayong parts of sentence, we have what we call the subject and the predicate. So in this sentence, ano ang predicate natin? Anyone?
Sir, vegetables?
Okay, very good. So the predicate here is vegetables. So when we say subject, that is the topic in the sentence. And then the predicate is the subject. So our predicate here is vegetables. So therefore, since this is our predicate in the conclusion, then this will be our major term. Okay, so vegetables is our major term. And if you're going to observe, the major term P is found in the major premise. Okay, so don't be confused. Yung P is ginagamit natin as a symbol for major term. So that is not used to symbolize predicate or subject for minor term. So P, that is the symbol for major term. And S naman is minor term. So that is not, so P does not stand for predicate or S does not stand for subject. Okay. And now what is our minor term naman? So minor term, from the word minor, it is found in our minor premise. If you're going to observe, we have here two terms in our minor premise. We have here the sweet potatoes and in the root crops. But which of these two terms are considered as the minor term?
Sweet potatoes.
Okay, let's check if it's sweet potatoes. Okay, so subject, so minor term is defined as the subject of the conclusion and found in the minor premise. So pag major term, it's the predicate. And for the minor term, it's the subject. So ano ba ang subject sa ating conclusion? It is sweet potatoes. And sweet potatoes is found in the minor premise. So that will be our minor term. Okay, so tama si Ms. Elizabeth. It is sweet potatoes. So that will be our minor term. Okay. So it's very important na alam natin kung ano ang major term and minor term and the middle term in a given categorical syllogism. So dapat maintindihan ninyo kung paano identify yung mga terms na to. Okay, let's now identify the middle term. So it's very easy to identify the middle term. So that is the term that is defined to be, or it occurs in each premise but not in the conclusion. So what will be our middle term now?
Sir, root crop.
Okay, very good. So our middle term will be root crops. So always remember yung middle term, it occurs in each premise. So dapat meron siya sa major premise and then meron naman siya minor premise. And it does not occur in the conclusion. Okay. Kasi pag nasunod natin yung formation ng mga terms na to, then our categorical syllogism or yung premise will support talaga yung conclusion. And yung conclusion is really derived from the two major premise. Kung tama yung formation ng ating terms. So the yellow one will be our middle term. Okay, so that is how to identify the terms in a categorical syllogism. And these terms are the classes. Okay. So ano yung mga classes natin? This is still, these are also called terms or classes. We're just going to identify kung saan ang major, minor, and middle. Okay. I hope nakuha nyo kung anong difference ng tatlo or how to identify the three terms. So for now, every categorical syllogism has its name. Okay, so may mga pangalan yung mga categorical syllogism natin. And to name a categorical syllogism, we need to identify the mood and the figure. So later on, we're going to learn about the mood and figure of a certain categorical syllogism. But before that, let's discuss first the types of categorical propositions that is used in a categorical syllogism, or the propositions that is used in a certain categorical proposition. So let's try to identify what type of proposition is our major premise, same with the minor premise and our conclusion. So meron silang mga certain types. Okay, and let's have here the four types of categorical propositions. So that is the propositions used in a categorical syllogism. So meron tayong tinatawag na universal affirmative, meron din universal negative, we also have your particular affirmative, and then particular, negative. So we also have here symbols of the following categorical propositions. So mas madaling i-manipulate kasi pag we are using symbols. Okay, so for universal affirmative, always remember that the symbol for that is capital letter A. Sa universal negative naman, capital letter E. And then sa particular affirmative, capital letter I. I yun, hindi yan one. And then particular negative, it is capital O. Okay. So let's try to differentiate these three categories or types of categorical syllogism. So let's try to first analyze the terms used. So when we say universal, let's try to differentiate universal from particular. So when we say universal, we are including all members of the class. So if we have here the class of root crops, which means if we say that it is universal, then we are referring to all types of root crops or all members of root crops. That is for universal. Okay. So for a particular naman, we are just referring to some or a few members. So when we say, if we categorize root crops as a particular, then we are referring to some types only or a few types of root crops. Yun ang particular. Okay. So how about affirmative and negative? When we say affirmative, we are including all members of root crops. Or we are, yes, we are including all root crops or all types of root crops. Yun yung affirmative. So sa negative naman, we are excluding. Hindi sila kasama. Or all types of root crops are not included or they are excluded. Okay, so again, universal, all we're referring to all members or all types. So particular naman, some or few. And when we say affirmative, included. And when we say negative, excluded. Okay, let's have here an example. So let's have here an example of universal affirmative. Okay, pakibasa nga. Mr. Morris. Yes, Mr. Morris, pakibasa yung example natin. How about Jadeline?
All rocks are hard things.
Okay, thank you. So that is a specific example of universal affirmative. So the quantifier for universal is, we have here the word all. So sometimes we usually have the word all, which means we are referring to all members of rocks here. So we have there the class of rocks and the class of hard things. So when we say universal, we are referring to all rocks. We have here the word or the quantifier are all. Okay. And for affirmative naman, ang qualifier natin dyan is the word are or is. So which means we are including all rocks as hard things. So that is for universal affirmative. So always remember, our quantifier for universal is, we sometimes use all as a quantifier as long as we are referring to all members of rocks. And affirmative, we have to the word are as our qualifier, which means we are including all rocks as hard things. Okay, so that is for universal affirmative. So for universal negative naman, we have here an example. Okay, pakibasa nga, Miss Ira.
No rocks are hard things. All rock are hard things. Are not hard things.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have here the example. So there are two ways of writing a universal negative. We have here no rocks are hard things, which means we are referring to all rocks here, which means when you say no rocks, lahat ng rocks are included, or all rock. So we have here the qualifier, or quantifier all. And the qualifier is, we have here the word are not, or no. So that is for the negative, which means all members of rocks or all types of rocks are not included as hard things. So remember that when we say universal, we are including all. And when we say negative, we are excluding or we are not including. If we're going to analyze this 2D1 proposition, we are excluding all members of rocks as hard things, or we're not including all members as hard things. So we can just see the quantifier is all. Sometimes we use all, but in this first example, we did not use all, but it is understood that we are referring to all members. And the qualifier is the are not. Okay. So pag sa universal affirmative, the usually used quantifier is the are only. Qualifier is are, and then sa universal negative, ang qualifier natin is are not, or you can find here the word no. Okay. Okay, so yan for universal negative. Sa sa particular affirmative naman, we have here an example. Diba sa nga, Miss Janelle?
Some rocks are hard things.
Okay, thank you. So from the word particular, as again, if we say particular, we're just referring to just few or some. So usually the used quantifier here is we have the some. So we're just referring to some rocks only. And the formative, we're including them as hard things. So again, the qualifier is are. So some rocks are hard things. That is for a particular affirmative. And for a particular negative, pakibasa nga, Miss Dulinan. Miss Dulinan. Nasa na si Miss Dulinan?
Sir, some rocks are not hard things. Not every rocks are hard things, sir.
Okay, thank you. So that is an example of a particular negative. So we can write a particular negative in two ways, as long as we are referring to some members only or a few members. So remember, we usually use some as a quantifier for particular, and the qualifier is are not, or the word not or no. Okay, so we're going to understand this second example. Not every rocks are hard things. We're referring to not all members of rocks, wherein we can understand this is understood that we're referring to few or some members are not included as hard things. Okay, so that is the four types of categorical syllogisms. Okay, so may katanungan ba so far para i-elaborate natin? Naintindihan ba or magulo? Okay, so
Naintindihan, sir.
okay, thank you. So let's try to identify the types of categorical propositions used in our example here. So we have here the three propositions. We have all root crops are vegetables. That is the first one. So is this, or what type of categorical proposition is this one? So what type of proposition is this? Is it A, E, I, or O? Yes, Miss Joanna?
Universal affirmative, sir, A.
Okay, thank you. So this is a universal affirmative. Okay, very good. How about the second one? All sweet potatoes are root crops. Yes, Elizabeth?
Particular affirmative, sir.
Particular affirmative, okay? Do you agree with Miss Elizabeth? Agree ba kayo sa sagot niya? This is particular affirmative. Okay, yes, Miss Joanna?
Universal affirmative, sir.
Universal affirmative, okay? Let's check later. How about the others? What's your answer? Miss Jonicio, what's your answer?
Sir, universal
Universal affirmative, okay. How about Mr. Felix? What's your answer? Mr. Felix? Ano dito yan? Okay, so our second proposition here, or the minor premise, is a universal affirmative. Okay. So also remember that for universal, we have here the quantifier all. Okay. And then for affirmative, the qualifier is the word are or is, which means we are including. So for the second, or for the minor premise, that is a universal affirmative. Okay. How about our conclusion? How about our conclusion? How about the others? How about Mr. Felix? Asan si Mr. Felix? Felix. How about our conclusion? Absent ba to? Lumayas ba to? Okay, so wala na si Mr. Felix. Let's have Isabel.
Sir A.
Okay, very good. So it is universal affirmative. Okay, so those are the types of propositions used in our example. Okay. So I hope nakukuha nung iba kung paano siya identify. So also remember, pag universal, you can find the word or the quantifier all. And pag affirmative, you can have the word are or is. Pag affirmative. Pag negative naman, we're going to have the word are not or no. Okay. And the combination of all types of propositions used in the categorical syllogism is referred as the mood. So ang mood ng ating categorical syllogism here is the combination of this one. So that is AAA. So that is what we call the mood of the categorical syllogism. It is the combination of the types. So that is AAA. Okay. So for the figure naman is, we're just going to look for the arrangement or the pattern of the middle term. So we are just going to refer with the middle term. So we have here 4 figures, figure 1 until 4. Okay, so the first row, that is the major premise, and then the second row is the minor premise, and then the last one will be our conclusion. So pag ganito lang ang arrangement, then it will be figure 1, wherein yung middle term natin is subject ng major premise, and then predicate naman ng minor premise. So that is for figure 1. It is diagonal. Backslash ba ito? Forward slash. That's backslash. Okay. And then for figure 2 naman, it is both predicate of the premises. So we have vertical. So that is for figure 2. For figure 3 naman, it is both subject of the premises. So the middle term is both subject of the premises. And for figure 4 naman, the middle term is predicate of our major premise and then subject of our minor premise. Okay, so that is for the figures of a categorical syllogism. We're just going to refer with the pattern or arrangement of our middle term. Okay. So dito sa ating example, what is the figure? So our middle term here is fruit crops. So what will be the figure of our categorical syllogism here? Is it figure 1, 2, 3, or 4? Ano ang ating figure? What's your answers? What are your answers?
For figure 1.
Figure 1. How about the others? Anong sagot natin? So sabi ni Miss Ira, it is figure 1. How about the others? Do you agree or disagree? Or do you have any other?
Agree.
Okay, thank you. So it's obviously that it is, yeah, correct, Mr. Morris. So it is figure 1. So tignan nyo lang yung pattern ng ating middle term. So pag ganito siya, then it is figure 1. So our example here, the figure is 1. Okay? Ayan, figure S1. So from this mood and figure of our categorical syllogism, dyan na manggagaling yung pangalan ng ating categorical syllogism. So the name of our categorical syllogism here is, we have AAA-1. So that will be the name of our categorical syllogism. Okay? Naintindihan ba natin or masyadong complicated? May katanungan ba?
None, sir.
None, sir.
Okay, thank you. So now let's try to have more examples on naming categorical syllogisms using the mood and figure. So it's very important na alam niyo kung paano identify the type of propositions used in our syllogism and the figure as well. Okay, so but before that, okay, let's have here an example or another example of categorical syllogism. So before we can identify the name, so the first thing we need to identify are the major term, minor term, and the middle term. Because we need to identify the middle term, we're going to use this to identify the figure, the categorical syllogism. Okay, so sinong maunang sasagot? Saan tayo tumigil kanina? Okay, balik tayo kay Miss Janelle. Okay. Miss Janelle, kindly open your mic.
Sir.
Okay. So, Miss Janelle, so we have here the major term is identified as the predicate of the conclusion and found in the major premise. So, our conclusion says that some scientists are not artists. So, what is our predicate in this conclusion? Ano ang predicate natin, Miss Janelle?
Sir, critical thinkers?
Sa conclusion tayo mag-refer to identify the predicate. Okay, our conclusion here is some scientists are not artists. So ano ang ating predicate? Okay, call a friend. Miss Janelle, call a friend.
Sir, Ira.
Okay, Ira, what is our predicate?
Sir, artist.
Okay, very good. So our predicate is artist. So therefore, this is our major term. And of course, it says here that major term is found in the major premise. So artist, and then artist in our major premise. And the symbol is capital letter P. Okay, so that is our major term. Okay, again, Miss Janelle. So what is the subject? If artist is the predicate, then what is the subject of our conclusion?
Sir, scientist.
Okay, very good. So that is our subject. Therefore, that will be our minor term. Scientist as our minor term, and it is found in our minor premise. So we use capital letter S to symbolize. And therefore, what will be our middle term, Miss Janelle?
Sir, critical thinkers.
Okay, very good. So that will be our middle term, critical thinkers. So critical thinkers appears in our premises but not in our conclusion. So those are the middle term, minor term, and major term. Okay, very good. So now let's proceed with the types. So let's identify the types of the following proposition used in this example. And let's have Ariel. Okay. Famous Ariel. So we have here our major premise. No artists are critical thinkers. So what is this type of categorical proposition? Miss Ariel?
Sir, universal negative.
Okay, very good. So it is universal negative or The symbol is E. Okay. How about the minor premise? Some scientists are not critical thinkers. Yes, sir.
Sir, particular negative.
Okay, very good. So that is particular negative. So it is capital letter O. Yeah. And then last one, our conclusion. Some scientists are not artists.
Sir, same lang. Particular negative din.
Okay, very good. So it is particular negative. So that is, so now what is the mood, Miss Eril, ng ating categorical syllogism?
Sir, EOO.
Okay, so that is the mood. Okay, so what is about, okay, so we have here the middle term, critical thinkers. Now, what is the figure of our categorical syllogism, Miss Eril?
Sir, figure 2.
Okay, very good, figure 2. So if that is the figure, therefore, what is the name of our categorical syllogism?
Sir, di ko na alam.
What is the name? Based on the mood in figure, we're just going to combine them. So ang mood natin is EOO, and then the figure is 2. So now what is the name of our categorical syllogism?
Sir, EOO 2.
Okay, very good. So that will be the name of our categorical syllogism. Okay, very good. Nasusundan ba natin yung iba or may katanungan na tayo? Do you have clarifications or questions? Okay, I think nasusundan ng iba. Okay. So let's have another example. Okay. So let's have Miss Dulina. Okay, Miss Dulina, can you open your microphone?
Sir, anya diay anya diay mo.
Okay. So from this example, we have here all horses are animals. That is the major premise. Minor premise is some dogs are not horses, and then the conclusion is some dogs are not animals. So from this example, what is our major term?
Major term. Wait. Sir, I'm not ready to answer your question, Pai.
Okay, so let's proceed. Kindly call a friend.
Ni Morris, sir.
Okay, Mr. Morris. Morris. Okay, magsagot ka na lang dyan sa chat. Okay, Mr. Morris, what is our major term? Ano ba yan? Paano natin ito masasagot? Paano natin itutuloy yung discussion natin mamaya kung hindi niyo alam kung paano identify yung name ng isang categorical syllogism. So it's very important na alam natin kung paano pangalanan ng isang categorical syllogism. Kasi doon natin i-base kung valid ba siya or invalid. Is it reasonable? Is it logical? Kung hindi natin alam kung paano i-name yung ating categorical syllogism, then you cannot understand if it is valid or invalid. Okay, so let's try to answer. Okay, let's have, okay, call a friend, Mr. Morris. Yung gusto mong sumagot. Morris. Okay, ni Mark. Ano ba ni Mark an?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, kung katagtay, late ka. Okay, Mr. Mark, I hope na alam niyo kung paano identify yung mga terms.
Yes, sir.
So what is our major term?
Animals.
Okay, very good. So that is our major term. So yung mga iba dyan, dapat alam nyo kung paano identify ang ating mga terms. So that is animals. So always remember, yun lang naman yung predicate ng ating conclusion. So alam niyo naman kung anong predicate at saka subject. Elementary topic yan. Okay. And then what is our minor term?
Some dogs.
We always have, we are not going to include the quantifier. We are going to have here dogs. Okay, so that is our minor term. And then what will be our middle term?
Horses.
Horses. Very good. So that is our terms. So we have here the major term is animals, minor term is dogs, and then the middle term is horses. Meron pa ba sa inyo ang hindi nakakakuha kung paano identify yung mga terms natin para elaborate pa natin? Okay, so hopefully nasundan natin. So pag may katanungan kayo, just ask in the comment section or the chat box. Okay. Now let's proceed with the mood and figure. We're just going to identify the types of propositions used. Okay, so that is Mark. Okay, call up friend Mr. Mark.
Sir ni
Hindi pa sumasagot.
ni Kenneth.
Mr. Kenneth. Mr. Kenneth, are you there?
Sir.
Okay. So again, we're going to identify the mood and figure. But before we can identify the mood, then let's identify the type of propositions used in each premise and the conclusion. For Mr. Kenneth, so we have here our major premise. What type of proposition is this?
A, sir.
Okay,
O,
very
O.
good. Anong O?
Oh, the J baba, sir.
Okay.
Tapos J baba na day.
Okay, so that is A. And then sabi mo O, and then
Oh, manon, sir.
O. Okay, very good. So meron na yung mga sagot sa kwan, I think. Examples to sa ating module. Okay, and then what will be the figure? So we're just going to look at the middle term. Anong figure natin, Kenneth?
Sir, figure 1.
Very good. So that is our figure 1. So ano ang pangalan ng ating categorical syllogism?
A001, sir.
Okay, very good. So that will be our name of our categorical syllogism. Nasundan ba natin? Or naguguluhan pa? Yung iba? Okay, medyo. Okay, let's have my example para tayo dito. Okay, meron pa tayong example. I think this is the last example. Okay, call a friend, Mr. Kenneth.
Sir, ni Felix.
Mr. Felix. Andito na ba si Mr. Felix? Kasi wala siya kanina. Felix, are you there? Mr. Felix.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just respond with my question. Okay, so we have here another categorical syllogism. Okay, we have some dreams are unconscious desires, so that will be our major premise, and our minor premise, all nightmares are dreams. Okay, so therefore, that is our conclusion. Our conclusion will be some nightmares are unconscious desires. Okay. So, Mr. Felix, what is our major term?
Dream, sir.
Dreams. Dreams? Are you sure? Okay, again, our major term is the predicate of our conclusion. So, refer muna tayo sa ating conclusion. So, ang conclusion natin is some nightmares are unconscious desires. So, ano ba yung predicate dito and ano yung subject? Di ba ang predicate is the information given about the subject, and the subject is the topic in our given proposition. Okay, so ano ang predicate natin dito, Mr. Felix, sa ating conclusion? Is it nightmares or unconscious desires? Felix.
Contentions desire, sir.
Okay, very good. So that is our predicate. Therefore, the predicate will be our major term. Okay. So that will be our major term. Now, what will be our minor term? Ano ang minor term natin? Mr. Felix.
Nightmare, sir.
Okay, so that is the subject of the conclusion, therefore it will be our minor term. Okay, so that is our subject. And how about the middle term? Now, so what will be our middle term? Ano ang middle term natin, Mr.
Dreams,
Felix?
sir.
Okay, very good. So that is our middle term, which is dreams. Okay, so our major term is unconscious desires, and then minor term is nightmares, and then the middle term is dreams. Okay, thank you. So call a friend, Mr. Felix.
Isabel, sir.
Okay, let's have Miss Isabel. Okay, Miss Isabel, kindly identify the mood of the proposition we have here, or the categorical syllogism. So what is the type of proposition used in our major premise, Miss Isabel?
I, A, A. I, A.
I, A, and then
I.
I. Are you sure? Okay, very good. So that is our mood, which is I, A, I. Okay. Okay, so sa I, it says there some dreams are unconscious. So it is a particular and it is affirmative. And then, yun yung I natin. Okay, what is the figure?
Sir 1.
Okay, very good. So that is the figure. Therefore, what is the name of our categorical syllogism?
IAI-1.
Okay, very good. So that is our categorical syllogism. Okay. Ano pa tayong example dito? Let's have another example. I call up friend Miss Isabel. Sino pa hindi pa sumasagot? Okay, balikan natin si Miss Jadeline. Andito ba si Jadeline? Jadeline. Okay. Miss Gumawad, are you there?
Sir,
Okay. So let's try to identify the following terms used in this. Okay, so we have here the following, and we have here the categorical syllogism. So let's identify the major term. Okay. What is our major term, Miss Jadeline?
Sir Wizard.
Wizard, are you sure?
Ay, Sir Goblin.
Oh,
Goblins.
Goblin, are you sure?
Wizard. Answer.
Mag-guess ka manan. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ulit ng major term? That is the predicate of our conclusion. Ano ba ang conclusion natin? We have the third proposition. We have here no wizards or elves. Ano ba ang predicate dito? Alam niyo naman siguro kung ano ang predicate and subject, di ba? So what is our predicate here? Is it wizards or elves? Jadeline.
Sir, inyantihan ko na dun.
Kapag malfunction ba't di-ikwa tayo? Okay, so we have here our conclusion. No wizards are elves. So what is the predicate of our conclusion? Is it elves or wizards?
Sir, elves.
Okay, very good. So if that is our predicate in our conclusion, then that will be our Miss Jadeline?
Major premises.
major term. Okay, so elves is our major term. Ayan. The major term is found also in the major premise. And then what will be our minor term? Yes, Gumawad.
Wizards.
Okay, very good, sir. Okay, so that is our minor term. Then our middle term is
Goblins.
okay, very good. So that is our middle term. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's have, andito ba si Jenny Lane? Miss Chinipsan? Miss Chinipsan, are you here? Nawala. How about Mr. Kadwagan? Mr. Kadwagan? Are you there, Mr. Ken? Okay. So balikan natin si Mr. Morris. Okay, Mr. Morris, sagot ka ulit sa ating comment or sa chat box. Okay, let's identify the mood of today's categorical syllogism. So what is the type used in our major premise? Mr. Morris? Ano ni Mr. Morris?
Sir.
What type of
AAA.
AAA? Ako
Yes, sir.
lahat?
As in J2 last.
Okay, so we have here A, E, E. Very good. So what is our figure?
AAA-1.
Yan ba?
Ton?
Anong figure natin? Tignan natin yung middle term. Yung arrangement niya is parang forward slash, di ba? Okay. So predicate and then subject. So what will be our figure? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Ah?
Figure 4.
Okay, very good. So that is figure 4. So ano ang pangalan ng ating categorical syllogism? Ano ang pangalan?
AAA-4.
Okay, very good. So that will be the name of our categorical syllogism. Okay. May katanungan ba tayo o question? Clarification? Okay, so pag wala, let's proceed with this one. But before that, let's have first. Okay. So I want everybody to give your entry or your own example of a categorical syllogism. So before we proceed with the validity of a certain categorical syllogism, kindly give your own example of a categorical syllogism. Paki-input lang sa ating chat box. Okay. Okay ba? So that is good for 5 minutes. And that will serve as our break before we proceed. So lahat ng andito, kindly give your own example of a categorical syllogism sa ating chat box. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And this will serve as our break, 5 minutes, and then you also type your own example. Then i-check natin. Okay, so let's resume. Let's resume. Okay. So, dadalaw pa lang yung nag-submit ng kanilang entry. Asan yung iba? How about the others? So, let's have 2 minutes more to give your own example. Magkakupit internet Make your own example. Asan na yung iba? How about Mr. Felix? Wala pa akong nakikita ng example mo. Elizabeth, how about Elizabeth? This is 5 points. Yung mga walang example, 0. Oh, Mr. Kenneth, kurang samot data entered mo. Konti conclusion na. Paki-combine nagsina. Tapos numerized. Ano nga enter no ko may isa pa lang in code yun. Tagsisina data. Ano ako kopyahan aja ada di example tayo. Magagamit kayo yung example yun. Okay, so while waiting for the others, let's check your examples. Okay. Simulan natin sa pinakauna. Okay, Mr. Mark, pakibasa yung example mo. Mr. Mark.
No heroes are cowards, some soldiers are cowards. Therefore, some soldiers are not heroes.
Okay, correct. That's an example. Let's have Isabel. Pakibasa yung example natin.
All mammals are animals. All dogs are mammals. Therefore, all dogs are animals.
Okay, very good. Next, let's have Julicio.
All junk food have salt. Pringles have salt. Therefore, Pringles are junk food.
Okay, very good. Tama. And then let's have Janelle.
All animals is mortal, but every dog is an animal. Therefore, every dog is mortal.
Okay, very good. That's correct. But we can remove here the word but. Ilagay na lang natin na every dog. So we have here a new quantifiers used, that is every. It's not necessary na we're going to use all. So other ways of quantifying a universal is every, which means we are going to include all. Okay, very good. How about, and then let's have Miss Dolinan.
All monkeys are animals. All mammals are animals. Therefore, all mammals are animals, sir.
So I think there's something that we need to correct here. So ilan yung terms na ginamit mo? We have monkeys, animals, and then mammals. Okay, so Miss Dulinan, ano ang ating major term sa ating example?
Major term, sir, is monkeys. Mammals.
When you say major term, that is the predicate of our conclusion. So yung conclusion mo dito is all mammals are animals.
Yes.
So that is our major term. And major term should be found in our major premise. Yung major premise means all monkeys are mammals. So there's no, the word or the term animal is not found in our major premise. So there's something that we need to correct here. So animals should be found in our major term. Okay. So you can see here that all monkeys are animals. And then your minor term is mammals. So you can say there that all mammals are monkeys. Okay. So we can on this one para maging tama yung ating categorical syllogism. We can revise our own example, pero we need to kunti lang naman yung iayos natin para maging tama siya. So always remember na yung major term it should be found in our major premise. Same with the mammals. Yung mammals mo is also found dito sa atin. Tama naman, it's found in our minor term. So kailangan lang natin ayusin yung major term and then yung middle term. So always remember that those two terms will appear twice, always. So tigdadalawa sila. Yung monkeys natin, it appears only once. So it should appear twice. So all of the terms should appear twice. So thank you, Ms. Julina. Let's have here Ms. Gumawad. Pakibasa ang example natin. Ms. Jadaline.
Sir, Sir, anya, basa ka example ko.
Yes. Ito ka na matutulog ka.
All fish swim. Every shark is a fish. Therefore, every shark swim.
Okay, thank you. So you can just Pakiayos na lang yung pag-form natin ng ating proposition. So you can state here, all fish can swim. So you need to make your sentence complete and complete. So all fish can swim. So parang maayos. Then same with the conclusion here, every shark can swim. Okay, very good. That's a correct example. Well, of course, you need to check our punctuation. So after the word therefore or other ways to state your conclusion, you are going to put a comma after the word therefore. Okay. Same with the other examples. The next, let's have Mr. Kenneth.
No politicians are honest people. Some politicians are honest, therefore some politicians are not honest people.
Saan ang conclusion natin? Okay. Okay, so let's check your example. Okay, Mr. Kenneth, ilan yung terms natin na ginamit mo? So, yung example. Ilan yung terms na ginamit natin, Mr. Kenneth?
Sir niya, yung term.
Ilan yung terms na ginamit natin? So, we have our class, or yung groups of class. So, if you're going to observe in your example, there are only two terms or class. We have the politicians and honest people. So, where is your other term? Para ma-identify natin yung major term, middle term, and minor term. So, always remember, pag categorical syllogism, meron tayong 3 terms dapat. Okay?
Answer.
So, in that 3 terms, we're going to identify the major term, minor term, and then the middle term. Okay, so paki-revise na lang yung examples natin. So, it is close naman. This is for Mr. Kenneth. Next kay Miss Lori, pakibasa ang example natin.
All men are educated, all rich are men, therefore all rich is educated.
Okay, thank you. Very good. That's correct example, but we need to have our correct punctuation. Dapat may period yan. Okay. And then let's have Miss Elizabeth. Okay, pakibasa yung example natin, Elizabeth.
All teachers are strict, all mothers are teachers, therefore some mothers are strict.
Okay, very good. So that is a correct example. So always remember, very important yung paglagay natin ng punctuation and then capitalization of the initial, the first word of a sentence. So dapat capital letter AA and then punctuation natin, comma, and then period. Okay, so that's it. Tama yung example natin. Okay. Let's have Ira.
Some candies are sweet, some chocolates are sweet, therefore some chocolates are candies.
Okay, let's check some chocolates. Okay, very good. However, we need to, for technical error, you need to have your punctuation and then proper punctuation and capitalization of terms. So yung sum mo, dapat capital letter yan, yung first na sum. And then, you need to give your period. So for the conclusion, it's a separate sentence. You cannot include that in your premise, then proper punctuation. But your example is correct. Okay. This for Miss Ira. Okay, let's have Miss Mablay. Pakibasa yung example natin.
All bananas are fruit. All fruit are nutritious. Therefore, all bananas are nutritious.
Okay, so let's check your example. So yung proper punctuation ulit natin, don't forget. Okay, so Miss Mablay, your middle term is, or your major term is, ano ang ating major term, Miss Mablay? Ano ang ating major term sa ating example? It is the predicate of our conclusion. Your conclusion is all bananas are nutritious. So therefore, your predicate is nutritious, and that is our major term. So your major term should be found in our major premise. Okay. So we need to follow the standard form. So pwede naman magkapalit yung major and minor premise. However, we're going to follow the standard form. So kung saan, yung standard form dapat mauna ang ating major premise and followed by our minor premise. So there are other forms of categorical syllogism naman. But we need to have our standard form. So yung nutritious na may predicate or the major term should be found in our major term. Wherein it is all bananas are fruit. So you can pwede natin ayusin to para maging tama. Okay, same with bananas. So parang nagkapalit lang yung major term and minor term natin. Okay. So that is for the standard form only.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Pero pwede magkapalit yan if you don't follow the standard form. Okay. But it's correct, by the way. Tama naman siya. Kahit na magkapalit, tama pa rin siya. It is for Miss Noblight. Let's have Felix.
All amphibians are cold-blooded vertebrates. All frogs are amphibians. Therefore, all frogs are cold-blooded vertebrates. Sir.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Tama yung example natin. Proper punctuation lang on spelling of frogs. Okay, tama. Very good. Now let's have Mr. Morris.
All soldiers are patriots. No traitors are patriots. Therefore, no traitors are soldiers.
Okay, very good. That's a correct example. Here for Morris. Okay. But we need to put comma after the word therefore. Okay, sino pang hindi sumagot dito? Okay, lahat na lang I think everybody give their own example of categorical syllogism. Okay, thank you for your own examples. So I do hope naintindihan na natin yung categorical syllogism. Okay. So now we're going to proceed on how we're going to identify if it is a valid or invalid categorical syllogism. So not all categorical syllogisms are considered valid. So there are other invalid categorical syllogisms. So only few categorical syllogisms or types or names of categorical syllogisms are considered as a valid. So when we say valid, it will satisfy the 6 rules that we're going to learn later on. So we're going to have here the 6 rules. It should be satisfied by a categorical syllogism so that we can call it as valid or logical or reasonable. So it is correct. However, if it is not valid, then we're going to categorize it as invalid. When we say invalid, it's fallacious. Okay, so from the word fallacy, fallacious, from the word fallacy, we mean where there is an error in the reasoning. So fallacy meaning there is an error in the reasoning. So if it is invalid, it should be justified with the rule that it violates. So if we claim that a categorical syllogism is invalid, then we need to justify our claim. And then we need to find the rule that is being violated. Okay. So we also have here a sound and unsound categorical syllogism. So when we say sound, that is both valid and true. Okay. So when we say valid, again, it satisfies the 6 rules that we're going to learn later on. And when we say true, it is based on factual information. It is applied in real life. It is a factual or a fact. So that is for a sound categorical syllogism. On the other hand, when we say unsound, once that the categorical syllogism is invalidated, then it is already considered as untrue or unsound, or it could be categorized as untrue. So once the proposition used is not based on facts, then it is not unsound. Even though na iisa lang yung proposition na hindi based on facts, or it is false, then it's still considered as unsound. So it's not necessary that the categorical syllogism is both invalid and untrue. As long as it is invalid, then it's already unsound. Or it's some of, it could be true, but it is invalid. Or it could be valid, but it is untrue. Right? So once na invalid, then unsound. Once na untrue, then it is still unsound. So that is ito categorization of categorical syllogisms. You can categorize this as valid or invalid or sound and unsound. So now we're going to proceed with the 6 rules of categorical syllogism, or the validity of a categorical syllogism. Okay. So but before that, we have here the following names of categorical syllogisms that are considered valid. So there are a total of 256 names of a categorical syllogism, but only 15 are considered as valid. But the other categorical syllogisms, name of categorical syllogisms are under conditions for them to be considered valid. But these are the following that are considered as valid categorical syllogism. So we have here AAA-1 until we have here IAI-4. So it's very important na alam natin kung paano pangalanan yung mga categorical syllogism. Kasi pag yung pangalan nila is belong in this list, then it is valid. But if it does not belong in this list, then it is invalid. Therefore, we need to find the rule that is being violated to justify that it is really invalid or fallacious. No, there is an error in the syllogism. Okay. So now let's proceed with the 6 rules. We're going to discuss this one by one, and then we're going to give. I'll be giving you a counter example. So we have here the following syllogism or rules. We have 6 rules. So we're going to learn this one by one. Okay. So pakibasa nga yung first rule natin, Mr. Felix.
There must be 3 statements with 3 terms, otherwise we commit fallacy or 4 terms.
Okay, fallacy of 4 terms. Okay, alam naman natin na ang syllogism, there should be 3 statements. And there should be 3 terms. And those 3 terms should occur twice only. So we have here what we call the major term, minor term, and middle term. And we also have the 3 statements, the 2 premises, the major premise, minor premise, and the conclusion. So let's have here a counter example of this one. Okay. Pakibasa nga, Miss Isabel.
All stars are heavenly bodies. Morris is a star, therefore Morris is a heavenly body.
Okay. So we have here our example. This is a counter example, by the way, of this rule. When it's a counter example, this is a non-example. Okay, so this is invalid by the rule of number 1. So let's try to analyze this example. Okay. So it states in rule number 1 that there should be 3 statements. Tama naman, we will have here 3 propositions. However, we don't only have 3 terms here. Tama ba? Ilan yung terms natin dito? Ilan yung terms na nakikita natin? So we have here the 3 terms that we can find here is heavenly bodies. So we could have here Mr. Morris and then the star. Okay. So if you're going to observe, parang 3 terms lang siya, di ba? Kasi tatlo lang naman talaga sila. However, we're going to also look in the context on how is each term being used. Kasi yung star is used in different contexts dito sa major premise and then sa minor premise. So yung stars sa ating first term or sa ating major premise is yung context niya dito is it is a heavenly body found in the universe. Tama ba yung stars? Yun yung nire-refer niya. However, yung star sa ating minor premise, it refer to a celebrity. Tama? Okay. So the two stars that is used, the two terms, although the first term star has a different meaning in the second term used in the minor form. So it appears na hindi lang tatatlo ang terms natin dito, but it has four terms. That is the stars, another star with different meaning, then heavenly body, and then noise. Okay. So this is invalid because it values this rule. Okay. And our justification will be fallacy of four terms. So that is the fallacy that is being satisfied by this categorical syllogism. Okay, so when you see fallacy again, it is an error in the reasoning. Okay. So let's have here another counter example of this way. We have here all dogs are animals, all cats are animals. Okay, so all dogs are animals. So if you're going to observe here, if you're going to observe here, it's obviously that meron tayong four terms, tama? So we have here dogs, and then the class of cats, and then the class of animals, and then the class of mammals. So it's obviously it violates our rule number one. So therefore, it is invalid and unjustified by fallacy of four terms. Okay, so that is the number one rule of a valid syllogism that is need to be considered so that we can categorize a certain categorical syllogism to be valid. Okay, nakuha ba natin? Okay, I hope nasundan natin. Okay, let's proceed with the second rule. Okay, pakibasa nga Miss Elizabeth.
Middle term must be distributed at least once. Otherwise, we commit the fallacy of undistributed middle. Basa
Okay,
din na di?
Ano, gusto. Okay, so thank you. So that is our second rule. Okay. So what do we mean by and what do we mean by distributed? When we say distributed, we are referring to all members of that class, or every members of that class is being considered. So it's obviously na yung distributed is very applicable for universal, affirmative, and universal negative. So ibig sabihin, pag universal kasi we are referring to all members, therefore it is distributed, or that class is distributed. Okay. So that is what we mean when we say distributed. All members are being referred or included, or it could be excluded, as long as we're referring to all members or all types of that class. And we're going to use D sa capital letter D as a symbol for distributed, and undistributed naman pag we're referring to some members only, or few members of the class. So we're going to use the capital letter U. Okay, so it's very important na alam natin kung paano natin identify yung term o yung class na distributed or undistributed. So we have here the following. So before we proceed with the counter example, let's have first here D on how we are going to identify if the term or the class is distributed or undistributed. So pag sa subject, mas madali siyang identify kasi pag universal affirmative, we're referring to all, therefore it's distributed. How about the predicate? Okay. So we need to analyze the context. So for universal affirmative, A, only the subject is distributed. Kasi nga universal, di ba? So which means we are referring to all. So all rocks, therefore the rock or the term rock or the class rock is distributed. And how about the predicate? So we need to understand the context of our predicate hard things. So the hard things here is only referring to all rocks. However, there are other hard things, diba? It's not only rocks. Ano ba yung mga hard things na alam nyo? We have furnitures, mga ganun. So therefore, the hard things is undistributed because it's not referring to all members of hard things. But the hard things in our predicate in our universal affirmative referring only to all rocks. It does not refer to all hard things. Therefore, hard things here is undistributed. Okay? So for a universal negative naman, it follows the pattern wherein both subject and predicate are distributed. Okay? So automatically, pag universal kasi yan, it is distributed, the subject is distributed. So our subject here or the class of rocks is distributed because we are referring to all types of rocks. And the hard things is also distributed because we are referring to all types of hard things outside the class of rocks. So therefore, it is distributed. If you're going to understand the context of hard things here, it refers to all hard things outside the class of rocks. So it is distributed. So for a particular affirmative, both subject and predicate are undistributed. Okay? So from the word some, it refers to only few or some members of rocks. Therefore, the rocks here is undistributed. And the hard things, it refers to only some rocks as well. So it is undistributed. So for particular negative, only the predicate is distributed. Okay, so it follows. Sabi nga natin, pag particular, it refers to some. So it is not referring to all members. Therefore, it is undistributed. And we have here not hard things refers to all rocks refers to all hard things outside the class of rocks. It is some rocks. So therefore, it is distributed. So just follow this pattern for us to determine pag distributed or undistributed ang isang term or class sa ating type of proposition or categorical proposition. So pag universal affirmative, always remember na ang distributed lang ay yung subject and yung predicate niya will be undistributed. For universal negative, E, both are distributed. So the subject and predicate are distributed. And then for a particular affirmative, okay, so both are undistributed. Subject and predicate are undistributed. And for a particular negative, only the predicate is distributed. So yung subject natin is undistributed. So that is the pattern on how we're going to determine the distribution of a certain class or term. Okay. So let's try to determine the distribution of the following class in our counter example. Okay. Saan tayo nag-end kanina? Okay, so let's try to answer every way. So ano ang, what type of categorical proposition is our first or our major premise dito? Ano yung type ng, or what is this type of categorical proposition? All sharks are fish. Anyone? So is this universal affirmative, universal negative, or not?
Universal affirmative, sir.
Okay, very good. So it is universal affirmative. Thank you. So therefore, it says pag universal affirmative, only the subject is distributed. So ano ba yung subject natin dito? Sharks. So meaning, yung shark is distributed and the fish will be undistributed. So we're just going to follow the pattern. Okay. And follows, since our main term is still universal affirmative, therefore the subject salmon here is distributed and the predicate fish is undistributed. Okay. And therefore all, in our conclusion, we have here all salmon are sharks. It follows that it is still a universal affirmative, therefore only the subject will be distributed. The salmon subject is distributed and the shark predicate is undistributed. Okay. But in this rule, we are just going to refer to the middle term. So ano ba yung middle term natin? That is fish. And if we are going to observe the word fish or the middle term fish is undistributed on the both premises. So it says in the rule that it should be distributed at least once. So yung fish dito is undistributed twice. So therefore, it is invalid and it is justified by the fallacy of undistributed middle. So that is what is being said by rule number 2. So we need to just check the middle term pag at least once ba distributed yan. So it could be pag distributed only once, then it is still, or it does not violate the rule. Pag both are undistributed, then it violates the rule. Okay. So let's have here another counter example. Okay. So pakibasa nga Mr. Kenneth.
Sir, they.
Pagdungdungog pakibasa dyan example tayo. Counter example.
That all Igorots are Ibaloy, some men are Ibaloy, therefore some men are Igorots.
So let's try to analyze this example. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have here our major term, major premise, all Igorots are Ibaloy, and that is universal affirmative. And sabi sa universal affirmative, only the subject is distributed. Therefore, Igorot here is distributed and the Ibaloy is undistributed. But before that, let's identify our middle term. Our middle term here is the class of Ibaloy. Okay, because it appears on both major premise and minor premise. Okay. We'll have here some men are Ibaloy, that is a particular affirmative. And for a particular affirmative, it says that both subject and predicate are undistributed. And we have here the example. So therefore, the men and Ibaloy here are both undistributed. And now let's check on the middle term. So the middle term is Ibaloy. And if you're going to look on this, Ibaloy in the major and minor premise, it is undistributed. So therefore, it is invalid and justified by fallacy of undistributed middle. So yan naman yung example, yan naman yung rule number 2. Okay? Nakuha ba natin? Gets ba or not? Okay, thank you for the response. So now let's proceed with rule number 3. Pakibasa nga Miss Elizabeth yung rule number 3. Elizabeth.
Sir?
Pakibasa yung example, yung rule number 3.
Ay, basa ko. Any term distributed in the conclusion must also be distributed in its primes. So otherwise, we commit either illicit major or illicit minor.
Minor. Okay, thank you.
Minor.
So, thank you. So, for example, for the rule number 3, we need to identify as well if the terms are distributed or undistributed. So that we can determine kasi dito sa rule number 3, it says that pag yung mga terms sa ating conclusion are distributed, it should follow that it is distributed in the premise. Okay. So let's have here a counter example. However, pag undistributed naman sila sa conclusion, it does not necessarily na they're undistributed as well dun sa premise. So yung sinasabi lang ng rule is, if it's distributed, then it should follow that it is distributed in the premises. Okay? So we have here, pakibasa nga Mr. Morris, counter example natin. Asan na si Morris? Ayan yun nga, apay ngawan kayo mutan. Morris. Okay, basa. So let's have Miss De La Cruz, pakibasa nga yung example natin.
All horses are animals. Some dogs are not horses. Therefore, some dogs are not animals.
Okay. Thank you. So we are going to identify first if the following terms are distributed or undistributed, or the following class. Okay, so we're just going to refer in our reference here. So we have here, we need to identify if what type of categorical proposition is being stated here. So we have here the major premise, all horses are animals. So that is universal affirmative. So therefore, only the subject is distributed. So the horses is distributed and the predicate animals is undistributed. Okay. And we also have here our minor premise, some dogs are not horses, and that is particular negative. So particular negative, it says that only the predicate is distributed. So yung subject niya na dog is undistributed and then the predicate is distributed. Okay. And then let's refer to the conclusion now. So some dogs are not animals. So that is still particular negative. Okay. So therefore, it says again that the predicate is the distributed one. So yung subject na dog, it is undistributed. So that is the distribution of the following classes. And now we're going to check if it violates the rule. So sabi sa rule, pag distributed, dapat undistributed sa premise. So we're just going to refer to the terms in our conclusion, or the major term and minor term. So let's have first here the dogs, the term of dogs or the class of dogs. And that's our minor term. So it is undistributed, so it's not a problem. So we're just going to check on the distributed terms. So we have here the word animals, or the class of animals. It is distributed in our conclusion, and it follows that it should be distributed in the major premise, or in the premises. Okay, so if you're going to observe, the animals in our conclusion is distributed, and in our major premise is undistributed. Therefore, it violates our rule number 3. So it depends. Pag it is a major term, then it is illicit major. And if it's a minor term, it is illicit minor. So it's not a problem pag undistributed. So yung titignan natin is yung distributed. Kasi pag once na undistributed yung dogs dito and then distributed yung dogs sa ating minor term, then that's not a problem. So yung titignan natin is yung distributed. It should be also distributed sa major premise or minor premise. So yung animals natin dito, that is distributed sa conclusion. That is not distributed in the major premise. Therefore, it is invalid and that is illicit major. So it satisfies the illicit major. Okay? So pag yung dogs naman yung tinutukoy natin dito, then it could be illicit minor kasi yung minor term. Since animals is a major term, then it is the fallacy or the fallacy is illicit nature. Okay. So let's have here another example. Pakibasa nga, Mr. Mark. Mr. Mark Lamadrid.
Sir, basa.
Saan?
All tigers are mammals, all mammals are animals, therefore all animals are tigers.
Okay, thank you. So we have here another counterexample. So let's try to identify the distribution of the following terms. Okay, so mas madali na lang itong example na to. Okay, so we have here again the first, all propositions used are universal affirmative. Tama ba? Okay, so we are going to after the universal affirmative, when it says that only the subject is distributed, and it follows that the predicate will be undistributed. So that will be du, and then du. Okay. So now we're going to refer on the conclusion. So it says that the rule is saying that if the term in the conclusion is distributed, it should be distributed also in the premises. So we're going to disregard pag undistributed siya. Okay. So we have here all animals are tigers. And if you're going to observe the word or the term animals is distributed. And if you're going to look on the animals on the minor term, it is undistributed. Therefore, it violates the rule. It will be invalid since it is a minor term, then it is invalid by illicit minor. Okay? So that is for the rule number 3 naman. Nagdungdungag kayo ba?
Yes,
Saka lang
sir.
pagdungdungag. Yes, Miss Isabel?
Sir, paano yun magiging valid?
Okay, so paano siya magiging valid? Ito ba yung example natin? Paano natin gagawin valid?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we can revise our, para hindi niya ma-violate yung rule, we can revise our conclusion. So pwede natin gawin na no animals. Okay, let's try to revise this. Kasi pag once na i-revise natin yung conclusion natin, we need to revise also the premises. Okay, so we can revise our premises and conclusion so that it will not violate the rule. Okay? Para maging valid siya. Yes?
Sir, edi paano yun pag undistributed, yung isa kailangan undistributed, edi valid yun?
Yes. Pag valid naman yun, di ba? Kasi we are just going to refer to, yes, tama. Ano yung sinabi mo? So pag undistributed naman, tapos undistributed sa taas, then it is still valid. Okay? So,
Tapos pag distributed, sir, tapos distributed din sa taas, valid din yun, sir?
yes, valid. Okay, tama. Pero pag undistributed sa conclusion, tapos distributed sa premise, still valid pa rin yun. Kasi nga yung rule lang, yung sinasabi lang ng rule is, pag distributed, then it should be undistributed. Pero pag undistributed, tapos distributed, is still valid. Kaya yung titignan natin is yung distributed lang. Kaya pag DD, valid. Pag DU, invalid. Pero pag UU, valid pa rin. And pag UD, it's still valid. Yung formation lang o yung pattern niya lang is DU. And that will make it as invalid. Okay? Nakuha ba, Ms. Isabel?
Mabalin, sir.
Okay. So, medyo nakakalito siya kasi pwede natin basta ang always remember na yung pattern niya is DU para maging invalid. DU. And the other pattern will be valid. Pero pag dalawa silang DU, then the fallacy committed will be illicit minor and illicit major. Pero pag isa lang, then it depends. So that is for rule number 3. Okay. Now let's proceed with rule number 4. So for rule number 4, at least one of the premise must be affirmative. If it creates the violation, then it commits fallacy of exclusive premises. So always remember that fallacies are error. Okay, these are error. So if it violates the rule, then it commits an error or a fallacy. We have here number 4. It says that at least one premise must be affirmative. And let's have here a counterexample. So always remember, dapat alam niyo kung paano identify yung proposition pag ano yung categorization niya or types na ginamit. So we have here a counterexample. No fish are mammals. Some dogs are not fish. Hence, some dogs are not mammals. Okay. No fish are animals. Is this? What type of proposition is this? Anyone? What type of proposition is this?
E, universal negative.
Okay, very good. It is universal negative. How about some dogs are not fish?
Sir, particular negative.
Okay, very good. It's a particular negative. And then how about some dogs are... Okay. So dito sa form, we are just going to refer on the premises. So we don't need to identify dun sa conclusion natin. So sabi kasi dito sa rule number 4, at least one of the premises should be affirmative. And if you're going to observe, both of our premises are negative. So it violates the rule and it commits fallacy of exclusive premise. Okay. So it's invalid and justified by fallacy of exclusive premise. Okay. Let's have here another example. Okay, no Christians are atheists. What type of
Universal.
proposition? Yes, Mr. Mark?
Universal negative.
Okay, yes, universal negative. How about all atheists are not evolutionists?
Sir, same lang. Universal negative.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to observe, we can observe that never of the, none of the premises are affirmative. Okay. So it is invalid by fallacy of exclusive premises. Okay, so that is for rule number 4 naman. Okay, let's have the second to the last rule, the rule number 5. May katanungan ba tayo? Okay, so
Sir?
okay. Let's have here rule number 5. So negative premise cannot have an affirmative conclusion. So violating this rule commits the fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion premises. Okay, so pag once na may negative sa ating premise, dapat negative din ang conclusion. Yun ang sinasabi natin fifth rule. So hindi dapat siya magiging affirmative. Okay, so let's try to have an example here. Okay, so kindly identify the following, or what is the type of these following propositions? All crows are birds.
Affirmative.
Yes,
Universal.
universal. Okay. And then some wolves are not crows.
Particular negative, sir.
Okay, very good. So that is particular negative. So if you are going to observe, we have here a negative premise. So pag once na may negative premise daw, according to the rule, then it should follow a negative conclusion. It should not be affirmative. And our conclusion here is what type of proposition?
Particular. Particular affirmative.
Okay, very good. So that is a particular affirmative. So if you're going to observe, meron tayong negative premise, dapat yung conclusion niya dapat ay negative. However, in this categorical syllogism, it is affirmative. Therefore, it violates the rule number 5 and it commits an error. And what error is that? It's the fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion premise. Okay. Let's have another example. Okay, can you identify the proposition? No honest people steal.
Universal negative, sir.
Okay, universal negative. Next.
Universal affirmative.
Okay, universal affirmative. Next.
Particular affirmative, sir.
Okay, very good. That is a particular affirmative. So if you're going to observe, it is, we have here a negative premise. We have here the major premise is negative. So therefore, it follows na yung conclusion should be negative as well. Okay. So it's valid and commits an error of fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion premises. So pag both negative yan, tapos affirmative yung conclusion natin, it still violates the rule. So it's not necessary na isa lang. Pwedeng isa or dalawa yung premise na negative. Okay. So that is for rule number 5. Nakatanungan ba?
Answer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's have the last rule. So, two universal premise that leads to a universal conclusion. Okay, and violation of this rule is called existential fallacy, or commits existential fallacy. Here for an example. Okay, kindly identify yung proposition natin. All mammals are animals. This is
Universal.
Affirmative.
okay, very good. And then second, all tigers are mammals.
Universal affirmative.
Okay, very good. And then some tigers are animals.
Particular affirmative, sir.
Okay, very good. So if you're going to observe in our example, in our counter example, it says in the rule that if both premises are universal, so universal yan, then it follows na yung conclusion natin ay dapat universal rin. So if you're going to observe it is a particular, therefore it commits or it violates the rule. So therefore it's invalid by existential fallacy. Okay. Let's have another example. Okay, pakibasa nga. Ay, pakibasa. To-identify, no honest people steal. This is what type of one?
Sir, universal negative.
Okay, very good. It's universal negative. And then all honest people pay taxes.
Universal affirmative.
Okay, very good. Universal affirmative. And then some people who still pay taxes.
Particular affirmative, sir.
Okay, very good. That is a particular affirmative. So if you're going to observe again, our premises are both universal. However, the conclusion is particular. So disregard yung ating second term, ay yung second word. So just going to focus pag universal or particular. So it's not necessary pag affirmative or negative. Okay, so pag both universal yung premise, then it should be universal in our conclusion. If we observe, it is particular in our conclusion, therefore, it's invalid by committing existential fallacy. Okay, so that is our last rule. Okay. Nag-gets ba or mahirap?
Gets, sir.
Get, sir.
Thank you. So let's try to have an example applying the rules, okay? Or let's try to have an example on identifying categorical syllogism if it is valid or invalid. So we have here all apples are fruits, no fruits are vegetables, therefore no vegetables are apples. So we need to identify the name of this first. So kailangan natin alamin yung pangalan niya. Okay. So we need to identify what type of proposition is used in every premise and conclusion. So all apples are fruits. That is A, E, I, or O. Ano?
A.
Okay, A. And then A. And then how about the next one?
E.
E. And then the last one?
E.
E. Okay, so now we're going to have the mood as A, E, E. How about the mood? Ano ang mood natin? So we're just going to, ano ang figure pala natin? So sa figure, mag-refer lang tayo sa ating
Figure 4.
Okay, tama. It is figure 4. So let's remember, pag figure 1, backslash siya. Yung pattern niya, pag ganun. Pag figure 2, vertical, pero naka, yes, vertical, pero sa ating predicate. Pag figure 3, vertical pa rin, pero sa subject. And then pag figure 4, forward slash, wala tawag doon. Forward slash. Basta slash. So that is for figure 4. So the figure of this is figure 4. And therefore, the name of this proposition is AEE4. AEE4. So it is valid because we can find in the list of valid propositions or valid syllogism, we can find EE4. We have here. Ito yung list. So titignan natin kung meron yung pangalan ng categorical syllogism sa ating list. So meron siya dito. AEE-4. Therefore, it is valid. And if we claim that it is valid, then we need to name or enumerate or list the name of the categorical syllogism. Okay. So this is valid. So we don't need to look on what rule is being violated. Okay. Let's have another example here. Okay. So pakit pa nga. Let's try to name the following propositions used. So we have here the first or the major premise. This is
A.
A. The second premise,
I, sir.
I. Then the second and the third one, the
I, sir.
conclusion, I. Okay, so that is AII. And what is the figure? Ano ang figure natin? Ano yung middle term natin, philosophers?
Sir, figure 3.
Okay, very good. It is figure 3. So we have here the middle term. Pag nasa subject yung middle term natin in both premises, then it is figure 3. So yung pangalan nating premise or yun ang ating categorical solution is AII 3. And let's check pag meron siya sa lists. Okay, so we have the list. And you can find here, or you can find here, AII 3. Okay, so therefore it is valid, and the name is AII 3 syllogism. So that is valid. So this categorical solution is valid. Let's have another example. Okay. So, pakipangalanan ulit yung ating mga proposition. Okay, our major premise is
E.
okay.
O.
O.
I, sir. Ay, O, sir. Charot.
O. Okay, very good. So that is EOO. And the figure is what is the figure?
Sir, figure 2.
Okay, very good. It is figure 2. So let's check pag may EOO2 sa ating list. Meron ba EOO2? Ada ba awan?
Awan. Valid.
Okay, so awan. So it is invalid. Therefore, we need to justify our claim as it is valid. We are going to look for the rule or fallacy that it commits. So we are going to isa-isahin natin na i-apply yung rule. Then, tignan natin kung ano yung rule na i-violate niya, kung bakit siya invalid. Okay? So we have for the fallacy. Then we're going to check on the fallacy. So we can summarize the rules into these fallacies that could be committed so that we can justify if it is invalid or valid. So we have here number 1 rule or number 1 fallacy. We have fallacy of 4 terms. So dapat may 4 terms, dapat may 3 terms in 3 statements or 3 propositions. If you're going to observe the 3 propositions, we have the 2 premises and the conclusion. And if you're going to count the terms, we have 3 also. We have artist, scientist, and then critical thinkers. Therefore, it does not violate rule number 1. It does not commit the fallacy number 1. So now we're going to proceed with fallacy number 2 or the rule number 2. Okay? So we need to identify again kung distributed or undistributed ba. Okay. Anyone? Paki-identify nga. Okay, so we have here our major premise. Is it DU, DD, or what? So number 1 is a universal negative. So therefore, for universal negative, it says here that both subject and predicate are distributed. Therefore, it is D and D. Okay. Number or the minor premise, it is particular negative. Therefore, it is the only predicate is the distributed one. So it follows that the subject is undistributed. So it is UD. Okay. Okay, so since we are referring only to the middle in rule number 2, then we're just going to look on the middle term. If you're going to observe the middle term here is the critical thinkers, and it is distributed twice. So therefore, it does not violate fallacy, or it does not commit fallacy of undistributed middle. Okay. So let's proceed with the rule number 3. Okay. For rule number 3, we need to identify the distribution of terms in every preposition. So does it commit illicit major or illicit minor? Okay. So for our conclusion, we have here some scientists are not artists. That is particular negative again. So therefore, the particular negative only the predicate is distributed. Therefore, it is UD. Okay. So UD. Now let's check. Kasi dito sabi sa rule na to, pag distributed yung term, then it should be distributed also at the premises. So let's just focus on the distributed term. And yung distributed dito na term is artist. Okay. And then, if we're going to look on the artist and the major term, it is also distributed. Therefore, it does not create or it does not violate rule number 3. Okay. So now let's move forward on rule number 4. Ulit sa sabi ng rule number 4. So dun sa rule number 4, at least okay, so at least one of the premises should be affirmative. So that is, if both are negative, then it commits fallacy of exclusive premise. So let's try to identify the name of the following proposition. Okay, so number 1 is universal negative, or the major premise is universal negative, and then the minor term is particular negative. Okay. So let's check pag it violates rule number 4. So sabi sa rule number 4, it could dapat yung premise is affirmative at least once. If you're going to observe, both premises are negative. Therefore, it violates rule number 4. Okay. So now that is our justification. It commits fallacy of exclusive premises. So it is invalid by fallacy of exclusive premise. Okay. So pag mayroon na tayong na-identify na fallacy na committed, then we can stop it there. As long as mayroon na tayong justification na isang fallacy na committed. Okay. So that is our third example. Okay. May katanungan ba?
None, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think nakukuha natin or hindi. Let's have another example. Okay, all teachers are strict, all mothers are teachers, therefore some mothers are strict. Let's check on the name. So that is A, I, and the figure is 1. Okay, so that is AAI1. And if you're going to observe, wala tayong AAI 1 sa ating list. Therefore, it is invalid. Now we're going to look on the rule that is being violated. Okay, so we're for the 6 rules or 6 fallacies that could be committed. Yeah. So fallacy of 4 terms. There are 3 statements here, and the 3 terms are teachers, strict, and mothers. Therefore, it does not commit fallacy of 4 terms. How about fallacy of undistributed muted? So let's try to identify the distribution of each term. Okay. For all teachers are strict, it is universal affirmative. Therefore, only the subject is distributed. So that will be DU. Then all mothers are teachers. So that will be DU as well because it is a universal affirmative. Then some teachers are strict. It is particular affirmative, wherein it says there that both subject and predicate are undistributed. So that is U and U. And then let's check on the middle term. So the middle term here is teachers. Therefore, and if you can see, teachers is distributed at least once or once only. So therefore, it does not it does not commit fallacy of undistributed middle. Kasi nga pag once na distributed, okay na yun. Or it follows rule number 2. Okay. So that is distributed once. The middle term is distributed once. So therefore, it does not commit fallacy of undistributed middle. Now let's proceed with the illicit major or illicit minor. Okay, so we're just going to check pag may distributed term sa ating conclusion. Okay. Pero pag titignan natin yung conclusion, walang distributed middle. So, it does not violate rule number 3 or it does not commit illicit major or illicit minor. So, automatic na pag walang distributed middle, we don't need to check kung undistributed ba siya sa ating premise. Okay? So, if you're going to observe dito sa ating minor term na mothers, it is undistributed and it is distributed in the minor term, minor premise. So it's okay. It does not violate it does not violate the rule. Kasi yung pattern dapat is DU para ma-violate na yung rule or mag-commit siya ng illicit minor or illicit major. So now let's proceed with rule number 4. So we need to identify the right of the premise. Okay, so for number 1, that is universal affirmative, the universal affirmative elect, and then some others are strict, that is particular affirmative. Okay, so sa fallacy of number 4, fallacy of exclusive premise, pag both are negative, then it commits the fallacy. But if there is at least once, or at least one premise is affirmative, then it does not violate the rule. Okay? If both are affirmative, then it does not violate the rule or it does not commit the fallacy. Ang sinasabi sa number 4 is hindi dapat maging both negative. Okay? Yung ating premises. Dapat may isang affirmative. Okay? So that is for rule number 4. So for rule number 5 naman, it says there that pag once na may negative, rule number 5, pag once na may negative sa premise, then dapat negative din ang conclusion. Okay? And if you're going to observe, both are affirmative. Therefore, and the conclusion is affirmative as well, therefore it does not violate rule number 5 kasi nga all of them are affirmative. Sinasabi ng fallacy number 5 is pag once may negative, then dapat negative yung conclusion. So wala tayong negative, kaya it does not violate rule number 5. And then sa rule number 6, pag universal ang both premises, dapat universal din ang ating conclusion. Pag once na particular yung conclusion, then it violates existential fallacy. Okay. So if you're going to observe, our premises are universal and in our conclusion is particular. So therefore, it violates rule number 6 or it commits existential fallacy. So this is invalid and justified by fallacy of existential fallacy. Okay. So that is our last example. So may katanungan ba tayo? No question?
None, sir.
How about the others? Before we proceed with the activity. Nakuha ba natin?
Samot.
Okay, so let's try. Let's check kung talagang nakuha natin. Okay, so I have here a categorical proposition and I want you to identify if it is valid or invalid. Pag you identify that it is valid, then you name the proposition or the categorical syllogism. And if you name, if you identify it as an invalid, then you need to justify. Okay. So this will be your activity. And then sa ating chat box, everybody kindly state your answer if it is valid or invalid. I need everybody to hand in your answer. Just state if just type if it is valid or invalid. Pag invalid, you need to justify. Pag valid, you need to give me the name of the proposition or the categorical syllogism rather. Okay, so I'll be giving you 5 minutes. So that will be 5 points again. So no response, 0 points. Sana yung response na iba. How about the others? Waiting for the others to give your response. Okay, let's have 3 minutes more.
Pero kasi ano kanina invalid. Netikas to.
Just give the name of the categorical syllogism. Pag valid. Bawal mag-check ng sagot sa comment, ah. Be honest, ha? Kung tag-check the answer, check ko. Basta kahit tag-check the answer, yung adan. Okay, last 2 minutes. You still have time to answer. Saan na yung iba? Extension 1 minute. It is 5 points. 5 points.
Sir, mabalin pa lang bangag sa pati answer or haanan?
Uri haanan. I-check tayo na.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Extension 1 minute again. It is worth 5 points, ha? Kaya kailangan magbiya ka ng sagot. 5 or 0. Miss Sophia, ito yung kangagupan. Sigurado kayo nga nag-answer kayo, ah? Bakit na-fail lang?
Yes, sir.
How hard did it mo? Okay, so let's check. I think everybody give their answers. Ayan. So what is your answer? So as far I can see, common answer here is invalid by committing illicit major. And that is the correct answer. Okay, so it is invalid by illicit major. Okay, so let's try ikitante ko. So usually ang nagkakamali sa iba is yung pangalan mismo ng ating categorical syllogism. Kapag ngantay ang mga pagananan tipo. So it's very important na alam natin kung how we're going to name the categorical syllogism because it will help us to determine the validity. Okay. So we have here the name of this is A, E, E1. So wala namang A, E, E1 sa list natin, di ba? So which means it's invalid. And that is justified by illicit major. Okay, so let's check yung illicit major na committed. Okay, so that is, ayan. So that is the explanation or the so for affirmative, that will be DU, universal affirmative, and then universal negative, that is D and D. Same with our conclusion, B and D. So if we're going to observe yung Catholic that is distributed, it should be also distributed in the premises, and it's correct, it's distributed. How about the Christians? Okay, so the Christian is distributed, and then it is undistributed in our illicit major, and our major premise. Therefore, it commits an illicit major. So it is invalid. Okay, check natin yung mga sagot natin. Okay. Baka may clarification tayo kung bakit hindi natin nakuha yung tamang sagot. So, dulingan, you can check your answer.